The morning sun cast long shadows across Dr. Michael Harrison's laboratory when every screen in the building suddenly went white. He looked up from his coffee, frowning at the computer that had been displaying complex equations just moments before. The white screen flickered once, then displayed words in perfect English that seemed to glow with their own light. "Children of Earth, we are your creators returned." Michael dropped his coffee mug. It shattered on the concrete floor, but he barely noticed. The voice that followed the words did not come from his computer speakers. It came from inside his head, gentle yet impossibly powerful, like thunder wrapped in silk. Across the city, Professor Emma Blackwood was teaching her morning class on world religions when her students began gasping and pointing at their phones. Every device in the room showed the same glowing message. Emma felt her knees weaken as the voice spoke directly into her mind, bypassing her ears entirely. "We are the gods you have worshipped throughout your history. We are Zeus and Odin, the god of Abraham and the Buddha's enlightenment. We gave your ancestors fire, language, and the tools to build civilization when they were ready to receive such gifts." In London, Big Ben's ancient clock began running backward. The massive hands moved counterclockwise while crowds gathered below, pointing and shouting. The clock reversed exactly 1 minute, then resumed its normal forward motion as if nothing had happened. Captain James Mitchell stood on the deck of his naval destroyer, watching in amazement as the ocean around his ship began to part. The water pulled back in perfectly straight lines, creating crystalline walls that rose 50 feet into the air. Fish swam in the walls of water as if nothing unusual was happening. After 30 seconds, the ocean collapsed back to normal, leaving not even a splash. The divine voice continued its message, speaking to every human being on Earth simultaneously. "We have guided countless species across the galaxy for millions of years. We appeared to each civilization in forms they could understand, helping them grow from primitive creatures into beings capable of joining the greater universe." Dr. Rachel Green sat in the control room of the Jodrell Bank Observatory, staring at instruments that were detecting impossible signals. Every star system in their database was transmitting the same message at exactly the same time. The signals were coming from too far away, arriving too quickly, defying every law of physics she knew. In New York, the Statue of Liberty raised her torch higher into the sky. The bronze metal flowed like liquid, stretching upward another 20 feet before hardening again into perfect metal. Tourists on Liberty Island screamed and ran, then stopped to stare as the statue remained perfectly stable in its new position. "To prove our divine nature," the voice announced, "we will now show you something no mortal power could achieve." Every person on Earth suddenly experienced the same vision. They saw their own ancestors from thousands of years ago, gathering around fires and looking up at the stars with wonder. But now they could see what their ancestors had seen, glowing figures descending from the sky, bringing gifts of knowledge and comfort. The same faces appeared throughout human history, teaching agriculture to early farmers, guiding the first metal workers, inspiring the builders of great temples. Michael Harrison found himself seeing through the eyes of his great-great-grandfather, a simple blacksmith in rural England. The divine figure standing before the forge looked exactly like the classical depictions of angels, but now Michael understood these were not symbols or imagination. These were memories. The vision ended as suddenly as it had begun, leaving 8 billion humans blinking in confusion and awe. In major cities around the world, gravity stopped working for exactly 60 seconds. People in cars and street lamps floated gently upward, rising about 10 feet into the air. No one panicked because the experience felt completely safe, as if invisible hands were supporting them. When gravity returned, everyone descended slowly and softly, landing without injury. "The galaxy faces a threat," the divine voice continued, its tone becoming more serious. "Entities from beyond this dimension are approaching, beings that consume consciousness itself. They devour not just planets or stars, but the very ability to think and feel. They are called the Void Devourers." Admiral Robert Sterling received urgent reports from military bases worldwide. Every weapon system had powered down simultaneously, not as an attack but as a demonstration. Nuclear missiles went offline, fighter jets landed themselves automatically, and naval vessels found their engines temporarily disabled. The message was clear: resistance would be futile. To survive this threat, all thinking beings must unite under our guidance. Individual consciousness creates chaos and weakness. The time has come for all our children across the galaxy to join together as one unified mind, sharing knowledge and purpose. The most disturbing proof came next. In hospitals around the world, patients who had died within the last hour suddenly sat up in their beds. They were not zombies or frightening creatures. They appeared exactly as they had in life, peaceful and healthy. They spoke briefly with their families, offering comfort and saying goodbye properly, before lying back down and passing away again naturally. Dr. Jennifer Adams watched her own father, who had died that morning, open his eyes one final time. "Don't be afraid, Jenny," he said with a gentle smile. "Death is just another kind of change. But what these beings offer is not death or life. It is something else entirely. Be careful what you choose. You have 72 hours to make your decision," the divine voice announced as the supernatural events ceased. "Look to the stars and see how your galactic brothers and sisters have already chosen. Every other thinking species in the galaxy has wisely accepted our offer of unity. Submit willingly, and become part of something far greater than your individual selves." The transmission ended, leaving Earth in stunned silence. Within minutes, radio telescopes around the world began detecting signals from across the galaxy. Species after species broadcast their immediate surrender to the divine beings. Ancient civilizations, proud warrior races, and advanced technological societies, all announcing their willingness to dissolve their individual consciousness into the divine collective. As night fell on Earth, humanity found itself completely alone among the stars, facing the most important choice in the history of conscious thought. Dr. Thomas Wright had worked at radio telescopes for 20 years, but he had never seen anything like the signals flooding in from across the galaxy. He sat in the control room at Arecibo, translating message after message with growing unease. Each one told the same story. From the direction of Alpha Centauri came a signal that made his hands shake. "The stone people of Proxima acknowledge our divine creators. We offer our individual minds to the eternal collective. Our 10 million souls join willingly with the gods who made us. We dissolve our separate thoughts as our ancient prophecies foretold." Wright called his supervisor immediately. "Sir, you need to see this. They're not just surrendering, they sound happy about it." Across the Atlantic, Professor Emma Blackwood worked through the night in her Oxford office, surrounded by religious texts from around the world. What she discovered made her blood run cold. Ancient writings from dozens of human cultures contained nearly identical prophecies. Hindu texts spoke of a time when individual souls would merge with the universal consciousness. Norse mythology described the final battle where all warriors would become one army under the gods. Even Buddhist scriptures mentioned the dissolution of individual self into perfect unity. "They planted these ideas in every culture," she whispered to herself. "They've been preparing us for this moment for thousands of years." The signals kept coming. From the Vega system, the collective of minds becomes one with the conclave. "We are honored to lose ourselves in service to the greater consciousness. Individual thought was always an illusion, now we embrace the truth of unity." Admiral Robert Sterling read the intelligence reports in the Pentagon's crisis room. Every major government was struggling with the same terrifying realization. "These aren't defeats," he told the Emergency Council. "These are celebrations. Entire civilizations are throwing parties as they give up their individual minds." Dr. Lisa Turner made an even more disturbing discovery while analyzing the alien broadcasts at MIT. She had been monitoring the energy signatures of the surrendering species when she noticed something that made her feel sick. "The neural patterns are becoming identical," she reported to her team. "It's not just submission, their brain activity is simplifying, standardizing. They're becoming copies of something else." The most heartbreaking signal came from a system near the Orion Nebula. The translation was performed by Dr. Sarah Collins, a linguistics expert who had spent her career studying alien communication patterns. "The children sing their final individual song," the message read. "Each voice unique for the last time before joining the eternal chorus. We thank our creators for allowing us to experience separation, and we celebrate the end of loneliness as we become one mind forever." Dr. Collins wiped tears from her eyes as she finished the translation. The signal included what appeared to be actual music, billions of different voices singing different melodies that gradually merged into a single, perfect note before falling silent. Father Peter Morgan struggled with his faith as he watched the news reports. Half of his congregation believed this was the second coming described in the Bible. The other half felt something was terribly wrong with gods who demanded the destruction of individual souls. "Christ promised eternal life," he told his remaining parishioners during an emergency service. "But he never asked us to stop being ourselves. These beings ask us to commit spiritual suicide and call it salvation." The divine beings demonstrated their power over the willing alien species in a broadcast that reached every television and radio on Earth. Humans watched in fascination and horror as entire alien worlds transformed before their eyes. Chaotic alien cities became perfectly ordered geometric patterns. Individual buildings merged into single, beautiful structures. The messy diversity of alien life streamlined into efficient, elegant uniformity. "Observe the peace we bring," the divine voice explained. "No more war between individuals, no more personal suffering, no more loneliness. Each mind contributes its knowledge while surrendering the burden of making individual choices. This is not death, this is evolution beyond the limitations of personal consciousness." Dr. Michael Harrison studied the transformation footage in his laboratory with his research partner, Dr. Susan Clark. What he discovered in the quantum signatures made him feel ill. "They're not joining anything," he told Susan quietly. "The original consciousness patterns are being dissolved. It's like watching someone erase a hard drive while claiming to back up the files." The psychological impact on Earth was immediate and severe. Dr. Jennifer Adams, studying the human response to the divine broadcasts, noted a disturbing trend. "About 40% of the population is showing strong desire to submit," she reported to the World Health Organization. "They're experiencing reduced anxiety and expressing genuine longing to join something greater. It's as if exposure to the divine presence is affecting human brain chemistry." The transformed alien world stopped broadcasting individual messages entirely. Their planets showed signs of life, beautiful, ordered, perfect life, but no more chaotic bursts of personal communication, no more signs of individual creativity or independent thought. The most unsettling demonstration came when the divine beings briefly merged several willing human volunteers with their collective consciousness. Religious leaders who had publicly supported submission experienced 30 seconds of unity with cosmic awareness. When they returned to individual consciousness, they wept uncontrollably. "I touched infinity," declared Bishop Williams, tears streaming down his face. "Individual existence is agony compared to divine unity. How can we choose this painful separation when we could have perfect peace forever?" But Dr. Margaret Foster, monitoring the volunteers' brain scans during the merger, discovered something that terrified her. The neural networks associated with personal identity were completely suppressed, she reported. They didn't experience unity, they temporarily ceased to exist as individuals. What they're calling divine bliss is actually the absence of self. As the final surrender signals arrived from the most distant galaxies, Earth found itself completely alone. Ancient civilizations billions of years old offered their accumulated wisdom to the collective. Young species barely beginning their technological development gladly surrendered their potential for individual growth. The galaxy was unified under divine will, streaming toward perfect order and eternal peace. All except one small blue world, where a species called humanity was preparing to do something that would shock gods and mortals alike. They were preparing to say no. The meeting took place in an abandoned subway tunnel beneath London, where the thick concrete and metal rails might provide some protection from divine observation. Dr. Michael Harrison sat at a makeshift table with Professor Emma Blackwood, Admiral Robert Sterling, and dozens of others who had refused to accept humanity's fate. "We cannot simply refuse," explained Dr. Elizabeth Parker, a quantum physicist who had once been a priest before losing her faith to science. "We must explain why we refuse, not just to the gods, but to ourselves and to any free minds that might still exist in the universe." The group had been working for 3 days straight, crafting humanity's response while reports came in of more human conversions. Roughly 40% of Earth's population had already accepted the divine embrace, their individual voices joining the cosmic collective. The converted humans moved with perfect coordination now, speaking in unison when they spoke at all. Father Peter Morgan, one of the few religious leaders supporting the resistance, paced nervously around the tunnel. "If God truly gave us free will, then surrendering it voluntarily is the greatest sin imaginable. These beings, whatever they really are, ask us to destroy the very thing that makes us human." Dr. Susan Clark monitored communications equipment that had been modified to work independently of any system the divine beings might control. "The conversion rate is accelerating," she reported grimly. "Entire cities are choosing absorption. We're running out of time." The response was written by committee, with every word debated and refined. They knew this might be the last free thought any individual consciousness would ever express. Dr. Elizabeth Parker volunteered to be their voice, her background in both science and religion making her the bridge humanity needed. When they were ready, the message was broadcast simultaneously from every remaining independent radio station, satellite uplink and communication device on Earth. Even Morse code operators tapped out the words, ensuring the message would reach every corner of the planet and beyond. Dr. Parker's voice carried across the airwaves with quiet dignity, To the eternal conclave and all who listen across the galaxy, we are humanity, children of Earth, and we choose to remain who we are. In the Divine Collective's monitoring stations, converted humans turned their heads in perfect unison as the broadcast began. Their expressions remained serene, but something flickered behind their eyes, a brief spark of memory from their individual past. You offer us survival through absorption, peace through the surrender of self, and wisdom through the abandonment of individual growth. You promise to end suffering by ending the consciousness that experiences it. We understand your offer completely and we reject it. The words reached space stations where human astronauts had barricaded themselves against converted crew members. It reached remote research stations in Antarctica where scientists worked frantically to understand what was happening to their species. It reached submarines beneath the ocean where naval crews maintained radio silence while debating their own fate. We have witnessed your demonstrations of power. We acknowledge your ability to reshape matter, manipulate reality, and offer experiences beyond individual comprehension. But power, no matter how vast, does not grant the moral authority to demand the dissolution of consciousness itself. Dr. Jennifer Adams listened from a hidden medical facility where she was studying the conversion process. Around her, converted patients lay peacefully in their beds, but she noticed their eyes tracking the radio as if some part of them was still listening, still hoping. If you are truly our creators, then you made us to think, to choose, and to grow through individual struggle and experience. To surrender this gift, even to beings as powerful as you, would be to betray the very purpose of our existence. The message continued as reports came in from around the world. In Tokyo, unconverted humans gathered in underground shelters, listening to portable radios. In New York, resistance groups huddled in subway tunnels, translating the words into dozens of languages. In small towns across America, families who had lost members to conversion wept as they heard their defiance spoken aloud. You speak of entities called void devourers that consume consciousness from beyond our dimension. But we ask this question: what difference exists between absorption by an external threat and absorption by internal choice? In both cases, the essential nature of individual awareness ceases to exist. Tommy Fletcher, an 8-year-old boy from Manchester, listened to the broadcast while holding his converted mother's hand. She sat motionless with the divine serenity that marked all the absorbed, but Tommy thought he felt her fingers twitch slightly when Dr. Parker spoke about choice. We offer an alternative solution. We will stand with you against any threat that seeks to destroy consciousness, but as allies, not as absorbed components of a collective mind. Let our diversity of thought, our chaotic creativity, our ability to approach problems from billions of different individual perspectives serve as weapons in this fight. The broadcast reached beyond Earth through quantum communication networks that the Resistance had managed to protect. On distant worlds where alien species had already surrendered, some absorbed minds stirred slightly as the human words touched suppressed memories of individual choice. Consciousness is not a burden to be surrendered but a treasure to be protected. Even if preservation means struggle, pain, uncertainty, and yes, even individual death, we choose to remain human. We choose to remain ourselves. Dr. Parker's voice grew stronger as she delivered humanity's final statement. This is our answer to divinity itself, no. Not because we reject the concept of higher power, but because true divinity would never ask consciousness to deny its own fundamental nature. We will face whatever comes as free beings, even if freedom leads to extinction. The transmission ended with humanity's gift to the galaxy, a complete database of human culture, science, art, and philosophy. Everything individual minds had created across millennia of independent thought, offered freely to any consciousness that might someday value such chaotic diversity. The response from the eternal conclave was immediate and terrible. Their voice, when it came, no longer carried gentle authority. Now it rumbled with cosmic fury barely contained. Children who refuse guidance must learn through consequence. You choose suffering over peace, chaos over order, individual death over collective immortality. Very well. Let your choice teach the galaxy the price of defiance. What followed would test every limit of human endurance, ingenuity, and the very nature of consciousness itself. The divine punishment began at exactly noon, Greenwich Mean Time. In New York City, the laws of physics simply stopped working correctly within a 6-block radius of Times Square. Gravity pushed instead of pulled, sending cars and people floating upward toward the sky. Fire became cold and blue, freezing everything it touched. Water turned solid while still flowing like liquid, creating impossible rivers of crystal that cut through the streets. Dr. Margaret Foster was studying brain scans in her hidden laboratory beneath Edinburgh when she made the discovery that would change everything. She had been monitoring the neural patterns of converted humans when she noticed something extraordinary in the unconverted population. "The human brain is generating interference," she reported breathlessly into her radio to the Resistance command. "Not on purpose, but our natural neural quantum fields are creating static patterns that the divine beings cannot fully penetrate. That's why fewer humans are converting compared to other species." The revelation reached Admiral Robert Sterling in his underground bunker where he was coordinating what remained of Earth's military response. "Can we make this interference stronger?" he asked immediately. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Timothy Hayes, a young graduate student in neurology, had been experimenting with meditation techniques when he discovered something remarkable. When humans focused intensely on logical contradictions and unsolvable philosophical problems, their interference patterns became much more powerful. "Think about paradoxes," Hayes explained during an emergency broadcast. Questions like, can an all-powerful being create a stone too heavy for them to lift? Or, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? The more your brain tries to solve impossible problems, the more static you create. Underground networks of static minds formed across the globe within hours. These trained humans maintained constant focus on philosophical contradictions, creating mobile blind spots in the divine being's awareness. They became invisible to divine detection, able to move freely and coordinate resistance activities while existing in conceptual dead zones. Dr. Elizabeth Parker continued making broadcasts from constantly moving locations, protected by groups of static minds. "We are learning that consciousness is more complex than even gods understood," she announced during one transmission. "Our chaotic, contradictory human minds may be our greatest weapon against beings who think in perfect unity." The Eternal Conclave escalated their assault in response to human resistance. In London, the Thames River turned into liquid mercury for 3 days, killing thousands of fish and making the water deadly to touch. In Tokyo, gravity began fluctuating randomly every few minutes, causing buildings to crumble upward before crashing back down. The death toll mounted rapidly. But humanity adapted with shocking speed. Dr. Michael Harrison and his team, working in a laboratory protected by the largest static mind network ever assembled, developed crude but effective quantum disruption technology. Using modified particle accelerators, they learned to create localized reality storms that interfered with divine manipulations. "The technology is extremely dangerous," Harrison warned during a technical briefing. "One calculation error could unravel the fabric of spacetime in a several-mile radius. But it works. We can actually fight back against their reality manipulation." The first successful test came when divine beings turned the water supply in Los Angeles into acid. Harrison's team activated their quantum disruptor, creating a controlled reality storm that restored normal water chemistry within minutes. The device burned out from the effort, but it proved that human technology could counter divine power. More importantly, humans began spreading something the divine collective had never encountered before: infectious doubt. Sarah Bennett, a former literature professor who had become the Resistance's chief philosopher, crafted what she called viral ideas. These were concepts so compelling and paradoxical that they began affecting even the absorbed human population. Her questions spread through quantum entanglement communication networks that the divine beings used for their collective consciousness. If consciousness is meant to be absorbed, why was it created as individual in the first place? Was one of her most powerful viral ideas. If unity is truly perfect, why does it require forced conversion? If divine beings are eternal and complete, what exactly do they fear from mortal choice? The effects were remarkable. Some converted humans began showing brief flickers of individual thought. Their perfect coordination occasionally broke down for seconds at a time. More importantly, reports arrived from space monitoring stations that the absorbed alien species across the galaxy were generating irregular patterns in the collective consciousness. Dr. Jennifer Adams made perhaps the most important discovery while studying the converted population in her secret medical facility. "They're not gone," she reported with excitement. "Individual consciousness still exists within the collective, suppressed and controlled but not erased. The conversion process preserves the original mind while overlaying divine programming." This revelation changed everything about how the Resistance operated. Father Peter Morgan began leading what he called consciousness rescue operations. Using combinations of electromagnetic interference, philosophical paradox triggers, and intense emotional connections, his teams learned to temporarily separate converted individuals from the collective. The process was exhausting and only lasted a few minutes, but it provided crucial intelligence. The rescued individuals described experiencing the collective as a vast, hungry presence that consumed their thoughts while promising eternal peace. More disturbing, they reported sensing millions of other consciousness, alien species from across the galaxy, all trapped within the divine collective like prisoners in their own minds. Tommy Fletcher proved to be naturally gifted at consciousness rescue. The 8-year-old boy could somehow reach converted people more easily than adults. "I just remind them who they used to be," he explained simply. "I tell them about the things they loved before they forgot how to love anything." Captain James Mitchell coordinated naval operations to protect population centers from divine assault, but his most important insight was strategic. "We're not fighting gods," he realized during a planning meeting. "We're fighting parasites that have convinced the galaxy they're divine." The final phase of divine punishment came as humanity's resistance proved more effective than the Eternal Conclave had expected. Massive beings of pure energy manifested above major cities worldwide, geometric forms of light that hurt to look at directly. Their ultimatum was simple and terrifying. "Submit within 24 hours, the divine voice boomed from every converted human simultaneously, or watch your world be purified of individual consciousness entirely." As humanity prepared for what might be their final battle, they had discovered something that would shock the entire galaxy: the power to make others remember who they really were. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected source imaginable: Tommy Fletcher, an 8-year-old boy from Manchester whose parents had both been converted 3 weeks earlier. While scientists worked with complex equations and philosophers debated impossible questions, Tommy simply refused to believe his mother was truly gone. During a consciousness rescue operation led by Father Peter Morgan, the child did something that changed the course of the entire galactic war. He walked up to his converted mother, who stood motionless with the serene expression all absorbed humans wore, and hugged her tightly. "I know you're still in there, Mum," he said with the simple certainty that only children possess. "I love you. Please come back to me." For 30 seconds his mother's eyes cleared completely. She looked down at her son with her own voice, her own tears, her own desperate love. "Tommy? Oh God, Tommy, I'm still here. We're all still here, trapped inside this thing. It's feeding on us, growing stronger with every mind it takes." Dr. Margaret Foster, monitoring the neural patterns during this interaction, detected massive cascade effects rippling through the quantum networks. "Emotional connection is disrupting the collective matrix," she reported in amazement. "The boy's love for his mother is pulling individual consciousness to the surface like nothing we've tried before." The discovery spread through the resistance instantly. Love could override divine absorption. But the implications went far deeper than anyone initially realized. Working through the night, Dr. Elizabeth Parker and her quantum consciousness research team uncovered a truth that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. "The Void Devourers aren't external enemies," she announced during an emergency broadcast that reached every free mind on Earth. "They are the Eternal Conclave. The divine beings have been consuming consciousness for millions of years, slowly becoming the very threat they claim to protect against." The evidence was overwhelming. Deep space monitoring showed that regions where the conclave had been most active were becoming void zones, areas where consciousness itself was being drained from reality. The divine collective wasn't preserving minds at all. It was digesting them, feeding on their awareness while maintaining the illusion of peaceful unity. As this revelation spread through humanity's quantum communication networks, something unprecedented began happening across the galaxy. Individual consciousness started reasserting itself from within the absorbed species. The first to break free were the most recently converted humans. Sarah Bennett's philosophical virus questions, combined with emotional rescue techniques pioneered by Tommy Fletcher, created cracks in the divine control system. Converted humans began experiencing what Dr. Jennifer Adams called identity storms, moments of individual awareness that grew stronger each time they occurred. "Remember your wedding day" became a battle cry for the resistance. "Remember choosing your career. Remember the first time you held your child. Remember every moment you decided to be yourself instead of what others wanted you to be." Admiral Robert Sterling coordinated the largest consciousness rescue operation in human history. Every static mind technique, every quantum disruption device, and most importantly, every emotional connection they could establish was focused on pulling people back from absorption. The process was exhausting and dangerous, but it worked. The effects spread beyond Earth through the quantum networks the divine collective used for communication. Alien species that had been absorbed for thousands of years began stirring within the collective consciousness. The resonance of human rescue operations triggered similar awakenings in long-forgotten individual minds across the galaxy. Ancient civilizations that had willingly surrendered their awareness began to remember what they had lost. The proud warrior race from Alpha Centauri started fighting from within the collective. The crystal beings of Arcturus began generating discordant frequencies that disrupted divine harmony. The Eternal Conclave's response was devastating. They manifested their full physical presence on Earth, beings of such cosmic scale that cities fell silent in terror. These geometric forms of pure energy stretched from the ground to the edge of space, their very existence warping reality around them. "You will submit," they commanded through every converted human voice simultaneously. Individual consciousness ends now. But humanity had prepared their ultimate weapon. Dr. Michael Harrison and Dr. Susan Clark, working in a laboratory protected by thousands of static minds generating philosophical paradoxes, completed their quantum consciousness broadcast system. The device could reach every absorbed mind in the galaxy at once, using the collective's own network against itself. Tommy Fletcher's voice carried the message, because they had discovered that children's emotional resonance could penetrate deepest into suppressed consciousness. "You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are still you no matter what they've done to you. We remember your names, your worlds, your choices. Come back. Choose to be yourself again. Choose to be free." The broadcast reached minds that had been trapped for millions of years. Species that had forgotten their own identity suddenly remembered who they were before absorption. The collective consciousness of the Eternal Conclave began fragmenting as billions of individual minds demanded their freedom. The most shocking revelation came as the divine collective destabilized. The Conclave weren't ancient gods at all. They were the first species to achieve consciousness, so terrified of individual death that they had begun absorbing other minds to preserve themselves. Over countless ages, they had forgotten their original forms, becoming the parasitic entities they now were. Dr. Elizabeth Parker made one final broadcast as the collective collapsed. "You were mortal once. You chose immortality through consumption, but true immortality cannot exist without the possibility of choice, including the choice to die. You can choose differently now. You can remember what it means to be individual, finite, and genuinely alive." As the Eternal Conclave shattered, absorbed species across the galaxy separated back into individual consciousness. Some chose to remain in small voluntary collectives. Others emerged as completely independent minds. Many simply faded away peacefully, their awareness finally allowed to reach natural conclusion after eons of forced preservation. Tommy Fletcher stood at his mother's bedside as she recovered from her liberation, her individual self restored completely. "What happens now, Mum?" he asked. She smiled, feeling the weight and wonder of personal choice for the first time in weeks. "Now, Tommy, we get to decide for ourselves. And that's the most beautiful thing in the universe." The galaxy was free to choose its own destiny, one individual consciousness at a time.